try to describe week 3 in college football. As I've been doing my show prep and looking at the slate and all the games on the board this weekend, John McKechnie's here with me. John, the only word that comes to mind, I think the proper word that comes to mind, is educational. I think we're going to learn a lot about some of these teams across the country this weekend. We got some big-time matchups. We're going to get to all of them here on College Football Tailgate, our Week 3 preview show. I'm Dan Watkins. He's John McKechnie. But, John, I feel like this is like – I don't want to call it like a full measuring stick weekend, but like we're going to learn a lot about these teams, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times, we're seeing handful of first conference game for a lot of these programs that have gotten off to good starts. We have a couple kind of tricky non-cons, maybe not quite like the crossover non-conference headliners like we saw in week 1 necessarily, but some legit matchups that we also got some like weird ones where like Oklahoma's going to Philadelphia for some reason to play Temple,
right.
That kind of thing. So there's a proper amount of weird in this slate, and I think that this is a weekend where we could see some upsets. Like there's a nice blend here, I think, of the big marquee matchups, and then some kind of undercard stuff where it's like, hang on, like don't just go ahead, rubber stamp, and say that Team X is just going to paste. We might see some kind of craziness going on here. I'm excited to talk about those upsets a little bit later on in the show, but regardless, yeah, you get 2 weeks in, you get 2 weeks of sample, 2 games that oftentimes look very different opponents. Third one, the answer in life is oftentimes the answer is somewhere in the middle. We'll see how that plays out with week 3 here.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a lot of panicky vibes going on in some parts of the country right now, looking at you, Clemson, South Carolina. But we'll get to that matchup in a little bit. But this could also be a weekend, John, too, where we take the 2 weeks of information, this nice stack we got of our notes, and we just throw it. Because some of these teams could come out and look totally different. Like, were they holding some stuff back? Your Georgia Bulldogs playing 2 cupcakes to start the season. Now they go up to Knoxville. So a lot to get to. We are going to talk about that Clemson-Georgia Tech game. We're going to talk about Georgia taking on Tennessee. We're going to talk about Florida taking on LSU, Miami and USF, the story of September, Notre Dame A&M as well. We'll have best bets for you guys at the end of the show. And as John was just hinting at, there's some really tricky spots here this weekend, too, that some teams could slip up if they're not paying too close attention, if they're not careful here. We'll get to those matchups at the end of the show as well. But, John, I think we should just kind of dive right into it. Week 3, you've looked at this whole slate. What are you looking forward to the most here in Week 3?
What am I looking forward to the most? Well, I am very nervous about this Georgia-Tennessee game. I think
Sure.
It's reflected in the line. The spread has changed dramatically over the course of the week. I think Tennessee's looked really good so far. So that's a huge kind of key cog to my college football enjoyment on Saturday. But we'll obviously be looking at that objectively. And then earlier on in the day, in my backyard here with Georgia Tech and Clemson. I mean, we've been talking about this one since the summer, since we did the ACC preview, and just how dangerous Tech could be, and how much we like them as a potential dark horse in the ACC itself. So them getting to potentially prove it against this Clemson team that has historically kind of just manhandled Georgia Tech should be pretty interesting. And yeah, those are kind of like the main two, at least to get me started. How about yourself?
Oh, for me, I mean, you want to go right with your squad with Georgia. I got to go right to mine. Like, Notre Dame takes on Texas A&M. That's a 7:30 kick in South Bend. Like, I'm not like full panicky, but I'm like kind of like, okay, like we figured some things out during this bye week, right? Like, we realized that we have 2 stud running backs that we should probably get the ball to. And I do have some numbers when it comes to Jeremiah Love specifically and Notre Dame's rushing attack and how important it is for the Irish to run the ball. We'll get to that when we get to this game breakdown here. But yeah, for me, it's just like, okay, we had this unusually early bye here. What did we figure out? Like, this offense is going to look better, right, against Texas A&M. And this is by no means is going to be any sort of like walk in the park Saturday night. This is going to be a tough matchup. So, yeah, that's obviously where my focus is immediately at. But then other than that, the Clemson one too. Like, this was my national championship pick. I picked Cade Klubnik to win the Heisman. They've let me down, really, so far at 1-1 here. Like, you got to show me something going into what's going to be a really interesting vibe. Are you going to that game, by the way? That is, like, right down the street from you, isn't it?
I'm playing around with the idea of going to get my hair cut in Midtown on Saturday morning and then just sauntering over. I
Grab a
know a
little
couple of tech
coffee,
people
walk
that,
on over.
yeah, yeah, maybe an Irish coffee, perhaps.
There you
If
go.
the occasion calls for it. I got to get loose for the Georgia game at 3:30 anyway, so like I can't be
Sure.
blamed for this. But Tech right in the middle of town here, so I mean I'm very very tempted to probably not go into Bobby Dodd, but at least like peep the scene around the stadium because I think this is one of the bigger home games that the Tech has had in recent memory, especially like not the Georgia Tech game is like always a big game both sides in
Right.
both ways, but as far as like wow, here's an ACC game that could actually kind of like decide the balance of the conference here, especially this early on in the season. You feel the buzz around here. There's no doubt about it.
Definitely. I think Bobby Dodd will be popping for sure on Saturday. All right. So something we've been doing each of the first couple of weeks here on these preview shows is trying to predict some headlines here. What are we going to be talking about Sunday morning, Monday morning in the world of college football? John, you got any takes, any headlines that you want to get off your chest here that you think we'll be talking about?
All right, I've got a couple for you here. First one, maybe a little bit obvious, but I still like it. I thought it was a good headline. Give me the King of Atlanta. Give me Haynes King, coming back here and really kind of making a statement for this Georgia Tech team as they go on and they do the dang thing that we've been talking about for months at this point. I think that Georgia Tech can win this game outright. Everyone will be just praising Haynes King. There's a great quote from Chad Bishop, who covers Georgia Tech for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution down here. Brent Key was asked about Haynes King and, is he going to be good to go? He goes, beware when the man jumps up and has a little bit of limp to him or starts rubbing on something on his body because it's about to be on. And I think that that's true. Like Haynes King's one of those guys that like you knock him down and like he just only makes him mad. So I'm very excited about this one. And again, I think that there is a real chance that Georgia Tech pulls this off. My next one, we'll see how actually wedded I am to this, but Lane Train derailed.
Ooh.
Now,
Okay.
think about it. Taylon Green has been the best player in college football so far. However, Arkansas hasn't played anybody, so it's fair to say we're grain assaulting this one pretty good. But Ole Miss, they didn't exactly look like world beaters against Kentucky. Kentucky can make anybody look a little bit sleepy, especially if it's up in Lexington. We've seen them do that time and time again, so you can't give full blame there. But Arkansas, I think, is a team that's not to be messed with. I think that I go back to the KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders type of setup that they had. I think they kind of have something similar going on with Taylon Green and Mike Washington there. So this is no joke. I think that it's a very kind of big statement from Vegas that Ole Miss is only 7.5 point favorites in this game, and I think it was like 9.5 earlier this week. So there's a chance here that Ole Miss, their slip up doesn't come in one of those huge games that they have on the schedule this year, but actually against Ole Miss or against Arkansas at home. So those are my two that I'm kind of running with here.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And the Austin Simmons injury, he is listed as probable. Lane did say he could have gone back into that game if necessary, if need be, against Kentucky last week. But definitely something to monitor there, especially if, like, let's say Ole Miss's offense gets out to a slow start, or if Simmons throws more first quarter interceptions, something that he's done early on in both of these first two games so far this season. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I like that a lot. For me, I got two for you guys as well. I'm actually going to go the opposite way from your Georgia Tech one, John. I'm just going to say sigh of relief. I think there's a number of teams across the country, Clemson being one of the biggest ones here, that are just like, I feel like you almost got to be tight in the chest watching your team if you're a fan of someone like Clemson or like Notre Dame or Georgia with their offense, how they've looked so far, or even Alabama. I think a lot of these teams are going to look much better this week. We're now a couple weeks into the season, a little deeper into the playbook. A little more comfortable with some of these newer pieces here. Things start to gel a little bit more. You're taking on maybe some bigger opponents in some of these games, or if you're Alabama, you get to take on Wisconsin, who you really shouldn't have any trouble with, especially at home in Tuscaloosa. But I think a lot of these schools and some of these teams that we thought were going to be powerhouses coming into the season are going to look much better. So that's one for me. And then the other one here too, guys, and this definitely could be something with gambling as well to take a look at, time zone trouble. We got a lot of teams that are going to be crossing multiple time zones, specifically in the Big Ten and in the ACC. Oregon has to go to Northwestern this week. That's a noon kick. That's a 9 a.m. Kick for the Ducks on their local time, so that could be an interesting spot there. USC has to go to Purdue this weekend. The Trojans under Lincoln Riley have not been good when they have to cross multiple time zones, so that could be a potential tricky spot. I know Purdue's not good at all, but that could definitely be an interesting game there. What else we got here for this one? Minnesota going out to Cal. PJ Flex squad, they're 2-0 right now. So is Cal. That could be an interesting trip-up spot as they go out to California, play on the West Coast. And then BC has to go across the country to play Stanford. Wouldn't surprise me one bit if Stanford actually looks coherent this week against Boston College, having to do another. BC was just at Michigan State, so they had to fly back. Now they got to go all the way out across the country again. So tough schedule there for the Eagles as we get going.
Man, I thought the Eagles had it too. That was like a low-key great game last weekend between BC and Michigan State. And, just like an extra word of caution for the West Coast teams going to the Midwest, like those can be some real sleepy environments, some real sleepy atmospheres, like West Lafayette at 11 a.m. local on a Saturday. Like if you're gonna have to bring, as Dabo would say, you got to bring your own guts to that game. Like you got to bring your own juice because the fans aren't going to, and you can get lulled into a false sense of security. We've seen Northwestern pull off the upset at home before against these West Coast teams playing in the morning. For some reason, I always go back to Kevin Hogan's really good Stanford team losing to Northwestern in week 1, a decade ago, because it's just right. One of those things that can happen in either West Lafayette or in Evanston. So tread lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely something to keep in mind. And I know last year was a big thing, especially early on in the season, that in the Big Ten, when these schools had to travel multiple time zones, at least when it comes to gambling, they weren't covering these big numbers here. So those are both monster numbers. USC, I think, is a 21.5-point favorite. Oregon, I believe, is at 28.5 just like a week ago. So something to keep an eye on here. But without further ado, I think we should start diving into some of these matchups. Let's talk about this Clemson-Georgia Tech game. This is a noon kickoff in Atlanta at Bobby Dodd on campus, John, like you were talking about. The Tigers favored by just 3.5 points here. It kind of feels like Clemson's limping into this game. For me, the big question is, does this offense finally start to get going here this week? Because it has not looked great so far against LSU and then against Troy. Adam Randall started to run the ball a little bit better last week, but I think we find out a little bit more about this Clemson offense and how they want to attack things going forward as they open up conference play. But what do you expect in this matchup Saturday?
I think an additional part to that Clemson offense not really clicking it on full cylinders just yet. We got to see what's up with Antonio Williams because he's been dealing with the hamstring, and he has no catches yet on the season. Played just 5 snaps against LSU before going out. Obviously, that opened the door for Brian Wesco to have a decent game last week, but ultimately, part of the reason why we liked Clemson so much was the depth and the top end talent of this pass catching group, and if that's kind of sideswiped a little bit and it starts with Antonio Williams, then it gets a little bit trickier. And like we were saying, run game has been an issue. I do think that Georgia Tech's going to be able to bottle up that rushing attack for Clemson. So it's going to be on Klubnik in a hostile environment. And I think, we would assume, given the pedigree, given the sheer amount of experience that Klubnik has, that hey, no issue. I can go into Atlanta and operate as I normally would, but I don't know. He hasn't looked great thus far this year. I could see some points coming up in this game. I could see the over being in play because I do think that Georgia Tech is going to be able to move the ball reasonably well on this Clemson team too. So I'm looking at a bit of a back and forth game that you wouldn't normally expect between these two teams. And I think ultimately when it comes to nut cutting time in the fourth quarter, I think I like Haynes King if I'm having to pick between the two guys to go out there and win a game for me.
Yeah, I think you're right in pointing out Cade Klubnik here. I think he is under the microscope this weekend. His stock, I think, has taken a bit of a hit here in the early part of this season. Interceptions in both games so far. Completion percentage is under 60 right now for the season. I'm wondering, John, if they try to run him a little bit more in this one. He has not really run much so far these first two games. And if you go back to last year with Clemson, once they got to conference play, you'll notice his rushing attempts start to go up. And I'm wondering if that's what they're going to do here, especially with how the running game is just a gigantic question mark out of this backfield right now. Yes, Randall ran a little bit better, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see Cade Klubnik try to run the ball here on Saturday.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that we've seen oftentimes, like especially against LSU, he would bail out of the pocket, like get himself on the move, get scrambling, but he would continue to look to make plays with through the air. I do wonder if like there's less like trying to do too much in this one. It's just like, okay, I got some green grass in front of me. I'm going to go take it. I'm going to go pick up this first down, and we'll kind of reset here. So if they can kind of nibble away and keep moving the chains with Klubnik's legs, I mean, he's definitely capable of doing it. It's a really good observation that, they kind of ticked it up during conference play last year. This would be a good spot for them to break it out. It's certainly better than, running him a bunch against Troy or something.
Definitely. And on the other side, we started to talk about this a little earlier, but let's kind of just reset this. Haynes King is a full go for this game, it sounds like. He's had a nagging lower body injury. He's been practicing this week. John, when I'm looking at Haynes King for this one in particular, I think he's going to have to make more plays with his arm than his legs in this one on Saturday. This Clemson run defense is really good. They've been really good so far this season. I think we're going to have to see King try to air it out a little bit more than he typically would like to, where those running lanes for him might not be there on Saturday. I don't know if you kind of get where I'm going with this.
No, exactly. I think Clemson definitely wants to kind of hem that in. There were, let's see, 5 games last year in which Haynes King threw it 30 or more times, and he was actually efficient in those games, but those teams were Syracuse, UGA, Vandy, Louisville, and Duke. So definitely not quite to the Clemson level other than the Georgia game, but that game went on for freaking ever. So a bit of like a sample tainter there, and the efficiency largely solid from King when asked to throw it a lot, 8-1 touchdown to interception ratio in those games, but again, he still has those questions about him as to whether like he can be like a throw first type of quarterback or get in that position where, hey, run game's not working. We're going to need to light things up through the air, especially with Eric Singleton now being at Auburn. And he only had 1 week to work with this new group of receivers. So Malik Rutherford and Eric Rivers, we're looking at those guys to really kind of need to step up and get themselves open for King.
So I have one last question for you about Clemson. And as I was doing my research and prepping for this kind of did dawn on me a little bit. Are we getting too worked up and too panicky about this team? I mean, the defense, on the other hand, has yet to allow more than 17 points in a game so far this season. Like, the defense is still looking really good, where like it's going to buy them time for this offense to figure it out. It just so happens that, well, they might have to really figure it out in week 3.
That's my problem is that like the time for figuring it out is over. You lost the first game and you have a really tough conference game here in week 3, and you kind of just went through the motions last week and got down by 16 points against Troy. Like, I'm sure you weren't expecting that necessarily, but yeah, I mean, point well taken. Like this defense is going to be one of the best. Like I think that coming into the year, that was a good kind of tailwind as to why Clemson could make the national championship. They had first round level talents at each 3 levels of their defense, but just when the offense is not holding up its end of the bargain, like it you get concerned, especially when I think like this is a game where Georgia Tech can kind of challenge that Clemson defense just enough here. So I think ultimately great defense for Clemson. That is a good point. It should be a steadying thing, but ultimately if the offense isn't getting it done, especially with the names on that offense, you start to really ask questions about, is Clemson meaningfully different than what it was like in the DJU era?
All right, so the line here for this one, Clemson minus 3.5. The total sitting at 53.5 for that over/under there. A couple trends for you guys. Clemson 7-1-1 against the spread in their last nine games against Georgia Tech, but they are 0-5 against the spread. They have not covered in each of their last 5 true road openers. So that's something interesting there. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, they've covered 3 straight games as a home underdog, including beating Miami outright as a 9-point dog last season. And they are also 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 ACC openers. Do you have? It sounds like are you going Tech money line? I'm not asking. Are you? You can save it for best bets if you're going to talk about it more later. But it sounds like you're firmly leaning Georgia Tech here.
Yeah, we'll just say it here. Yeah, I think Tech wins this game. Give me Tech money line.
Okay, very good. All right, guys. So if you could do us a favor, if you like the content, subscribe to our YouTube page at College Football Tailgate. We are growing over there. The full-length shows get posted. We got some shorts as well, some other side content too. When we don't run into some copyright infringement rules, some stupid things from certain things from certain committees in our great game that don't allow you to post things on the internet. But anyways,
not even the visage.
College football. Not even. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. Just walk away. I'll hit an old man. As Alan pumping gas there in The Hangover. But anyway, subscribe or follow us on Spotify or Apple. College Football Tailgate. Follow us on Twitter at CFB Tailgate 25. And then, of course, our TikTok page is just always a lot of fun at CFB Tailgate. You can find us on there as well. All right, 3:30 kickoff. Georgia at Tennessee in Knoxville. Rocky Top, John, your Dogs favored by 3.5 right now. This line has plummeted from where it was just on Sunday a few days ago. Moving through some key numbers here. Total sitting at 49.5. I look at this one and I'm like, okay, history tells us that Georgia should go in there, figure things out, and just absolutely roll. Since Tennessee last beat Georgia in 2016, the Dogs have won the last 8 by at least 14 points in each one here. We got a 3 and a 5 sitting out there just tempting people. But you're obviously much more tapped into this team than me. What are we thinking? How are we feeling going into Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, oddly enough, this is the diciest of the games since Georgia started beating Tennessee regularly in 2017. Like, even when Tennessee was ranked number 1 in the country going into Athens a couple of years ago, I was less nervous about that game as a Georgia fan than I am about this one. This one, of course, will be on the road. First road SEC start for Gunnar Stockton. Just throw out a couple of numbers here for everybody. I was a little bit surprised by the history of this rivalry. They've only played 52 times. They basically didn't play from 1937 to 1968. I did not know that. So that was okay. I thought that there'd be like 100 games worth of sample, but Georgia leads the all-time series 29-23. Again, winners of 8 straight are the Bulldogs. They've covered in 6 of them. This line is the lowest since Kirby's first year, which was also the last time that Tennessee beat Georgia. For this year, like we were saying, line has moved tremendously, been basically cut in half since Sunday. According to the computers, Tennessee 18th in defense, according to SP Plus, 3rd in defense. So 18th in offense, 3rd in defense. Georgia 11th in offense, 6th in defense in that regard. I think ultimately it comes down to I'm going to assume that Gunnar Stockton doesn't have a good game, so it's going to come down to defense and running the ball for Georgia. Like I don't think that Stockton has looked particularly good at throwing the football just yet. He's got that scrambling capability that can keep plays alive or pick up first downs, things like that. But I think in a conventional setup where he's making a throw. I think he's been late on his reads a bit this year, and Georgia hasn't been able to block super well. I think that applies to both their passing, pass blocking, and their run blocking both. Austin Peay was kind of moving their offensive linemen around a little bit last week, and those were first-team offensive linemen for the record. It wasn't just walk-ons playing against Austin Peay. So that coupled with the fact that Tennessee, has a very high-rated defense by the computers. I feel like that this is going to be a real nail biter. I know that's suggested in the line here. I think that this really could be the year that Tennessee kind of breaks the drought, though.
So when I look at this one, I think you're right to point out Gunnar Stockton here. Tennessee's going to be without their top two cornerbacks again. They haven't played yet this season. And the real question is, can Gunnar Stockton take advantage of that? I mean, I feel like this Georgia offense, John, has just been kind of going through the motions the past couple of weeks here against Marshall and Austin Peay. Have they been holding back a little bit? Is there a higher gear that they can click into for this one? Where I want to say yes, I trust Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and those guys to figure things out and get things going. And then, yeah, maybe they were just going through the motions a little bit the first couple of weeks, where they'll be able to step up and get going and click into that higher gear here. This is going to be, like I mentioned at the start of our show, that this was going to be a week that's going to be educational, and we're going to learn a lot about some of these teams. I think we learn a lot about what you have in Gunnar Stockton, if you're a Georgia fan, and what you have at your quarterback position here, because it seems like this is the spot for him to take over this game and like ease some concerns that I know you have and other Dogs fans have as well.
Yeah, I think coming into the year, and I don't want to like completely throw Gunnar Stockton under the bus or anything, but I kind of felt like the way that the winds were blowing going into the year, the game to circle for like, is Gunnar Stockton the guy, was going to be the Alabama game at the end of September. I think the deadline's been pushed up, so I hope he's ready for that, because I think that this Tennessee game is going to be, something else here, and I think additionally, if Stockton's struggling, if he's turning the ball over, like I do wonder if Georgia goes to a different look at quarterback with Ryan Puglisi going back there. He's more of a conventional pocket passer, not quite as mobile as Stockton, but if they get into like an absolute must-throw situation, I do wonder if we see him. But I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just laying out all the various possibilities here. But yeah, Tennessee, I mean, they've looked great. I will say on the other side is that Georgia and Kirby Smart, they know how to game plan for this Tennessee offense. They've largely been able to stop this offense that is otherwise, kind of blowing the doors off of other teams in recent years. I mean, the Hendon Hooker year, Tennessee was completely unstoppable on offense, and then they got stopped. So that is something to monitor here, like just that sheer the devil type of thing, where Kirby kind of knows how to defend like those vertical seams and like the wide spreads that Tennessee tends to deploy on offense.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Tennessee offense. We haven't talked about Joey Aguilar yet. He's looked really solid so far for the Vols. For me, like I can't trust, like this is going to go a long way for me. I think this game over whether or not I can trust Aguilar going forward. Like, okay, he hasn't turned the ball over yet. We know turnovers have been an issue for him in his past. You talk about how Kirby's going to know how to defend this defense here. That like makes me feel like, okay, they're going to be able to bait Aguilar into some bad mistakes here. And if that happens, especially if you get like an early one here, I do think Georgia's going to be able to separate. But that could be a real key to this game, turnovers. As I'm not really sure what to expect from Aguilar. And like if I look to like what we've seen from him in his career, it's that he might have a rough day on Saturday too.
Yes, I think that's kind of been understated so far when it comes to the discourse around this game is who Joey Aguilar has been, which was a double-digit interception thrower oftentimes at App State. Has cleaned it up, has had better players to work with around him in a very quarterback-friendly system and everything. But, yeah, this is him making his first home start against an SEC defense with Tennessee. So that in and of itself, I think, will be a challenge in its own right. And I got from looking at other kind of Georgia guys to keep an eye on the defense. Number 9, Chris Cole. He looks like kind of like that next like holy crap, where do they find these guys type of player. So just a little viewing guide for y'all.
I'll give you one on the offense, too, who we have not mentioned. I think this sets up potentially to be a big day for Zachariah Branch. With these missing pieces in the Tennessee secondary, I think we could see him get deployed in different ways here, and he could be the star of this game on Saturday. I think this sets up really nicely for him in that speed to take advantage of Tennessee's defense.
Yeah, he's wicked fast, and this running back behind Nate Frazier, Peanut Phillips, he kind of looks like Devin Achane when he runs, so... Also,
there's a name.
Something to watch. Yeah.
Very good. All right. So as we mentioned, Georgia, the line right now as a Thursday afternoon, sitting at 3.5. The Dogs have won 8 straight matchups in this series, all by at least 14 points. So we'll see if that trend continues on Saturday afternoon. All right. So we head a little further south on Saturday afternoon in a game that, when you were looking at the start of the season, could have been a potential sleepy spot, is no longer sleepy. Everybody is wide awake in Miami on whatever substance you want to say they're using, whether it's traditional caffeine or otherwise. USF, the story of the college football season, they head to Coral Gables to take on the U and the Canes. Miami, John, favored by 17.5 in this one. Like I said, going into this game, or going into the season, this could have been a spot that you circled like, ooh, okay, maybe Miami trips up a little bit here and this game's a little closer than people are thinking because they have Florida and Florida State coming up the next couple of weeks. But nobody's sleeping on this game anymore. I expect Miami to be locked in here on Saturday afternoon. But what are you expecting? Do you think this USF magic start continues Saturday?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't believe how things have gone thus far for USF. I mean, 2 ranked wins in their first 2 games. You know, they have the opportunity, I think, to be like the 4th team ever to go 3-0 against ranked teams to like start the season. Some crazy statistic like that from ESPN earlier today. So, yeah, it's just kind of wild to think about. But I think by virtue of USF beating Florida, they have Miami's full attention. Like, there's no looking ahead anymore. There's nothing that like scares a big program more than like being potentially upset by like especially another team like within your state. Like, you just don't want any part of that. So I do think that Miami kind of does play their A game, and it's interesting the way this spread has moved. I think it was like 15 earlier in the week, and now we're looking at like 17.5, 18.
Yeah, that's
I
what
do
I got,
fear that. I fear that this is kind of where the Cinderella run at least hits a part where they're going to need to change the tire or something, because I still believe in this USF team potentially being the group of 5 or 6 representative in the college football playoff. However, I think that this Miami team just too good on both sides of the ball. I think that Notre Dame game really kind of taught us a lot about what Miami can be, and knowing that they're going to be going full speed in this one, I think ultimately, I think maybe I would consider USF first half against the spread, but ultimately I think that Miami kind of pulls away here in the second half.
Yeah, I just think Shannon Dawson is by far the best play caller that USF will have seen here in these first 3 games. Carson Beck's the best quarterback that they've seen in these first 3 games, at least when it comes to throwing the football. And then Ruben Bain, all due respect to Florida and their defensive line, which I know is pretty good, they don't have an absolute menace like Ruben Bain, who I think could absolutely take over this game here. We did see Byron Brown against Miami a year ago, and they really kept him in check, like 14 carries for 26 yards or something like that. Didn't get much going through the air either. He's kind of had to be almost like a Superman kind of guy for USF so far to start this season. I don't think he's going to have a good day on Saturday. And if Carson Beck looks even close to what he did against Notre Dame, where he's just efficient and keeps moving the chains, and Miami, that offensive line is really good too, I think this could be a long day in South Florida for the University of South Florida anyway. But yeah, I like Miami here to cover. I feel more confident in that. And I was actually when these lines first dropped, I was actually thinking about taking USF, but as I've gone closer and closer here, I think Miami rolls on Saturday.
Yep, I think that's like the sober way of looking at it. Like it's fun to imagine USF pulling this off, and like I'm certainly not opposed to the idea of them doing it. Like I'd be stoked. It'd be an unbelievable story. But I think ultimately, awesome, as we get closer to kick, you just feel out the game, and you run through the different permutations at which this could go, and it's like, man, most of the sims I'm running in my brain, Miami wins by like 3 touchdowns.
So a couple of interesting trends, though, for you guys who are looking to bet this one. Mario Cristobal just 5-10-1 against the spread as a home favorite at Miami. That is not a good cover percentage at all. And I will point this out, too, here with the total sitting at 57.5. These 2 schools have met 6 times in the past. The under, 4-1-1. So a little interesting, maybe a little sluggish, a little slower of a game. But we'll see here because I do think this Miami offense is the best one that USF has seen so far this season. All right, moving on. Florida, who just lost to USF, they head to Baton Rouge here to take on LSU. It's a 7:30 kick, John. We got LSU at night. We know that's going to be a scene. Brian Kelly openly telling the students and the fans to pretty much get rowdy for this one and get ready. He wants the LSU fans to make their presence felt here Saturday night as the Tigers are favored by 7.5 at home. Total sitting at 47.5. I'm looking at this one, and like we've talked about, Billy Napier could be on the hot seat at this point after that loss to USF. Like, no time for the Gators to lick their wounds here. They head right into the Tigers' den, Death Valley. I'm a little worried for Florida that this could get ugly, and some of the discourse with Florida fans could get really ugly after this one on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, luckily a lot of our listeners have already given Florida the coaching hot list that they need to be looking at, so like that's covered.
You got to call
if
Saban.
Florida does
have to call him.
you make him say no. But yeah, I think you look at this game and it's hard to push against your initial instinct, which is Death Valley at night. You're on the road. You just lost to USF. You're telling me that you're going to go in there and win this game. Like, there's a lot that's pushing you in LSU's favor here. No question about it. And like, look, I understand personal scar tissue. I don't hate Brian Kelly maybe as much as you do, but like, I think it's fair to say like I don't trust him that much, but I do trust him more than Billy Napier at this point. I think that last week was an abysmal showing by Napier, both in terms of like play calling, and he's not giving up the play calling, and then of course just kind of like the general team, like how do you do the things that you did to end up losing that game, just so undisciplined. I think that's a reflection of the coach. So all of that very problematic in Florida's direction. However, I think ultimately Florida can just kind of, I think we're going to see a great DJ Lagway game, and maybe that I'm basing that off of almost nothing. I do think that Jaden Baugh is one of the best running backs in college football. I think LSU hasn't seen like a truly great rushing game just yet. Clemson wasn't really going to be testing them too much in that regard. LSU's got the great linebackers, of course. But I think ultimately against, like, it's one of those college football things where it's like everything is telling you to bet LSU, and LSU gets this done, and I certainly could see that. But 7 and a hook, I think Florida somehow hangs in and makes this one close. Like, I think that logic would dictate that the spread should be higher than this, and that kind of like is catching my attention enough to push me a little bit towards Florida.
So I've been trying to like talk myself into how does Florida make this a game? Like, because obviously I think on offense, they're going to have to throw the kitchen sink at LSU. Like, everything you got in that playbook, whatever you got, like emergency break glass, this is the week for Florida to do it, because they especially for this coaching staff and this program and the buy-in and all that kind of stuff, and just really to calm their fans down too. They have to do everything they can on offense to try to move this ball. Going to be interesting to see. But on defense and the defensive side here, Billy Napier did talk about before the season that he loves his defensive line and this front seven here. Feels like it's the strength of their team. So we know Garrett Nussmeier can become turnover prone when he's pressured. This LSU offensive line is still relatively inexperienced here. If they can create enough pressure, I do think that's your avenue for Florida to keep this game close here and cover this number and maybe even somehow try to pull out a win, right? So if they can make Garrett Nussmeier uncomfortable, he took 3 sacks last week. It's got to come from the Florida defensive line. They need to be in the backfield pretty much all night here.
Now, I do know that Florida's getting, his name's escaping me, but number 88 back on that defensive line. He was a big contributor for them last year, who has not played in either of Florida's first 2 games of the year. So a good unit getting one of its better pieces back, I think it certainly is going to help things. And like you said, we were worried about this LSU O-line off the jump against Clemson. They held up, but round 2 here, Florida's definitely no joke as far as that front seven is concerned.
Yeah, for sure. And then offensively, DJ Lagway, something that Florida's going to have to eliminate here is negative plays. They have been tackled for a loss 18 times so far through 2 games. Not good. That is not good at all. And Lagway, we really haven't seen him run much yet this year. He has not had that home run through 2 games. I don't think that's coming this week against this linebacking core. Perkins and Weeks, both Weeks of the Weeks brothers. I don't think Lagway's going to have to make plays with his arm, I think, on Saturday.
Yeah, like I think Florida is like kind of in more trouble in that setup than to draw on like earlier in the show than Tech is when King is forced to throw. Florida needs to find a way to kind of like not make LSU put them in a box like that.
So a couple interesting trends when it comes to this matchup in particular. The last 3 home games against Florida, John, LSU has scored at least 42 points. The last 3 meetings in Baton Rouge between these two schools have all gone over with an average of 82 points. We got a total here sitting at 47.5. Are you tempted? Does the total tempt you at all in this one?
Absolutely. How could it not? Those trends are great. But I mean, gosh, I think of LSU's offense, and I see like the scoreboard just lighting up, and I see the potential of this Florida offense, and I can see it as well. So I think we get there.
All right, very good. Okay, we got one more full game breakdown to give to you guys. Texas A&M heads up to South Bend, Indiana to take on Notre Dame. John, the Irish favored by 6.5 right now. We got a total sitting in that 48-49 range. For me, I wrote pretty much one line on our notes, and it's, what did you learn during your bye week, Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock specifically? Did you realize that you have arguably the best running back room in the country, and are you going to use them here in this one as you take on Texas A&M? Notre Dame got away from running the football. Yes, they were trailing in that second half against Miami, but I want to see them running the ball out of the gate here. I do think that is a strength for the Irish and can be a real strength in this matchup. So that's what I'm looking for out of the Irish. You don't have to showcase CJ Carr. You can showcase CJ Carr and get him more comfortable against Purdue next week. This week, though, Saturday night, you got to get the ball in your best player's hands.
So keep cooking. You're a resident Notre Dame guy. The tracks have yet to be laid down. Go ahead and just fire. What's going on in this game? What do you think? I can't make heads or tails of this one. So
let me just. I found some notes here, and I got to give a shout out to College Football News who dug this up specifically here. Just 14 touches for Jeremiah Love against Miami. I do think that's going to change here, but this is what College Football News writes. They ran the ball just 28 times total against the U, and they lost. They failed to run more than 28 times, just 2 times last season, both of their losses against Ohio State and Northern Illinois. In 2023, they failed to run the ball 28 times, just 1 time. They lost that game to Louisville, and then they didn't get to 29 carries 1 time in 2022. A loss to USC. So the formula here in the Marcus Freeman era, John, tells us Notre Dame needs to run the ball at least 29 times here. I think we see them run the ball effectively against this A&M team who did allow, I believe, over 200 yards on the ground to UTSA in week 1 here. So I do think Jeremiah Love's going to have a big night, and I do think that will ultimately set up well for the Irish. And Marcus Freeman, by the way, 8-2 off of a bye.
Yeah, I feel like if you're Freeman, you got 2 weeks to kind of stew in the Miami game. You hear from everybody, and you know that you didn't get the ball in your best playmaker's hands nearly enough. So I'm hoping that Jeremiah Love is 110% ready to go and can take on the heavy workload and everything, and Price can kind of fill in as like that change of pace guy, and Carr. I thought he looked awesome in the second half. It was almost like a J.J. McCarthy type of deal where it's like that first half maybe not great, and then he kind of gets comfortable, gets confident in that second half. You could tell the team really was rallying up around him. So, yeah, Notre Dame is favored by a touchdown for a reason. I feel good about them in this spot. I think the Marcel Reed X factor and kind of like the way that the A&M passing game had. Again, like they haven't really played anyone of note or repute yet defensively, but I think a lot of people really underestimated what Marcel Reed is as a passer, and I think that they're proven wrong so far. I think Casey Concepcion has looked good, and my guy Mario Craver is just like ripping it up through these first 2 weeks. So that. Notre Dame's secondary, I think, is going to be maybe a little bit more on notice than we would have thought. I do think also, though, that outside of Marcel Reed as a rusher, A&M's run game kind of suspect to me, and I think that that's a problem on the road.
Yeah, so Marcel Reed did leave that game last week against Utah State. He is good to go. I believe he's probable for Saturday night. Last year when these two teams met in week one, it kind of like turned into in the second half that Notre Dame was just kind of able to like impose their will on A&M. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this is going to be a very, very tight game here. I think I would lean towards taking the points with A&M. I'm not going to bet this one. I don't like betting Irish games. It just makes me even more uncomfortable than I already am on some of these big spots. But I do think ultimately, though, that Notre Dame's going to be able to prevail, especially at home. All respect in the world to Mike Elko and his team. I just think coming out of a bye, I think that just gives such an advantage and tips the scales here to Notre Dame so much in this one that's why I think the Irish are ultimately going to be able to prevail on Saturday night in South Bend.
Yeah, I think that's the correct way of looking at it. And yeah, I'm not making you bet it, but I think I would say that I think A&M loses by like 4 points.
Be right in that range. All right, so speaking of betting, let's get to our best bet segment, John. We're 17-17-2 here so far to start the season. We had a great week one. Things came back down to earth in week two here. Let's bounce back and have a nice week three for the people. What do you got?
Okay, I'm gonna go back to where we started from early on in the show. I like Ole Miss, Arkansas under 61.5. I think that one gets a little bit dicey, and I think that the clock's going to be running a lot as well. Give me Arkansas plus 7.5 on top of it. So big
double dipping in one game.
Yeah,
all right,
dip. Why not? Because I don't know, the rest of the board's a little bit crazy to me, but that Arkansas game, I did some serious soul searching on. Sam Pittman, don't let me down. Give me Colorado plus 4.5 at Houston. I honestly don't care who the Colorado quarterback is. I don't think Houston's that good. I think Colorado is good enough to hang in there against Houston, even with that one being on the road. I got another one circled for you. I know everyone else has this one circled. It's a game being played in South Florida at Pitbull Stadium. Give me the Owls. Hoo-hoo. Plus 2.5 over FIU.
On the road.
Then lastly, yeah. I mean, it's going to be an absolute bloodbath, carnage down there. And then lastly, another in-state sauciness. Give me Old Dominion plus 7 against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, something wrong with them boys.
All right. You're getting weird on the board. I love it. All right. So for me, I gave us Kansas State on the money line earlier this week. We got that at plus money. It has since moved. K-State is favored now by 1.5. So we're looking forward to that on Friday night. Let's go Temple plus 23.5 at home, taking on Oklahoma. Like you mentioned earlier, John, for some reason, OU is heading up to Philadelphia this week, but they got Auburn next week. So I think that could be a potential trappy spot there. Speaking of Auburn, let's take the points with South Alabama, who goes to play Auburn this week. South Bama plus 25.5. We're riding with them. They made things really tough for Tulane a week ago. I think they can hang in within 4 touchdowns here against Auburn on Saturday. We're going to go Purdue plus 21.5, as I mentioned earlier on in the show. Lincoln Riley in these multiple time zone crossings just have not worked out well historically. I know Purdue stinks, but I think they keep this one within 21 points. Georgia minus 3.5. History is on our side here. I think that we find out something about the Dogs in Gunner Stockton on Saturday. Let's go over 47 in USF. Over 47 in LSU in Florida. When these two teams get together in Baton Rouge, it's usually fireworks, so I like the over there. We're going to go over 52.5 in UCLA in New Mexico. And then finally, shop around for this one because every book I think is different right now. Texas State plus 16.5 as they head to take on ASU, Arizona State in Tempe this weekend. I think this Texas State offense can hang around here, and Arizona State's offense has just not looked good so far. So I like the Bobcats to keep this thing close.
Look at that. I love a Texas State call, and I love being able to kind of like, You see in the different books, they don't know what to do about it. That means it's a good spot to jump in there. And yes, defending my card, I felt like I was going two for the normies with my picks, like especially in week one. So I wanted to look around and see if I could find something strange that we could go after. So yeah, and Old Dominion, They hung in with Indiana in the opener, and Virginia Tech again.
Right.
They've stunk it up through these first couple of weeks. I'm sure they're looking forward to getting home. Lane Stadium, night game. Old Dominion's beaten them before in the not too distant future. Mm-hmm.
All right, very good. Okay, so we wanted to talk a couple of trappy spots before we sign off here. I mentioned that Oklahoma Temple game. That could be a little interesting, like a letdown and also look-ahead spot at the same time for the Sooners. Just come off that big win against Michigan. Now they got Auburn next week. That's interesting to me. I mentioned that USA against Auburn game as well. Any thoughts on those before we keep moving on here?
Yeah, I was really encouraged by South Alabama's performance last week against Tulane. I think that's just too many points, and I think Auburn's got a lot, coming on the line next week. So I could see them, winning that one handily, comfortably, what have you, but maybe not just blowing the doors off in 25.5. So a lot of points, and South Alabama's going to be up for that one. The backyard brawl is really interesting to me, actually, too, because we're looking at Pitt giving 7.5 on the road at West Virginia, and kind of like the LSU game, it's like, well, that seems low, if anything, after last week. I mean, West Virginia, they lost to Ohio. West Virginia, they lost their starting running back, Jaheim White, kind of like the engine of that offense. To me, I'm like, why is it only 7.5? I think that's fascinating. In a rivalry game, you always can kind of like throw some certain things out the door. I think Nico Martial and co. somehow, and Rich Rod, they find a way here to maybe ruin Pitt's, what's looking like a really great season for Eli Holstein and the Pitt Panthers. Maybe West Virginia playing a little spoiler in the backyard brawl here. So I'm not betting that game, but I do think if you're looking at Pitt, maybe think again.
All right, I'll throw a couple more at you. Western Michigan at Illinois. The Illini favored by 4 touchdowns in this one. They got Indiana next week. They just come off that big win against Duke, too, here as well. That could be an interesting game. And then how about Vanderbilt at South Carolina? That's interesting to me as well. Vandy on the road. They're getting 4.5 there. South Carolina plays Ole Miss next week, so that's interesting. And then finally, Utah at Wyoming, I think, could get a little interesting late Saturday night. The Utes favored by 23.5. We love our guy, Devin Dampier. But 23.5 seems like a big number on the road. Utah opens up Big 12 play next week against Texas Tech, which is going to be a lot of fun. So that could potentially be an interesting spot there as well.
Huge game, and yet weird stuff can happen in Laramie, Wyoming. It's just one of those things. So bear that in mind. It is funny to think that like Utah will have had an easier time against UCLA on the road than Wyoming. That game could be a little bit trickier than we would like, but still like Utah to win that one, of course. And the line in the Vandy South Carolina game, I think it was like 6.5 or reopened at 6.5 earlier this week. I think we're looking at 4 now in favor of South Carolina. So the people are on the idea that Vanderbilt and Pavia's got another big upset in them. I think that's possible. I don't think that South Carolina looked all that good against a Virginia Tech team that isn't that good.
Right. Yeah. Pavia versus Sellers. That's a fun one that you got to have the multiple TVs going on. I know we got some great marquee matchups, but don't sleep on that matchup either. All right. I think that's going to do it for us for our Week 3 preview show. We will break everything down on Monday. Follow us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. It's free. It doesn't cost you a thing at College Football Tailgate. Same thing, Spotify or Apple, and tell your friends that Dan and John got some stuff cooking up for you because that's what we do here on College Football Tailgate. All right, guys, we'll talk to you.